My name is Teddy Jacobson of Actions by T. I am a pistol smith in Sugar Land, Texas. I am a trigger specialist and work on over 100 different models of handgun actions. On this tape, I will discuss Handgun Springs. It is a very complex subject, and I will talk about revolvers as well as semi-autos. Most gunsmiths and pistol smiths just cut springs. I can't do things like that because my guns protect life and property. And police nationwide carry handguns that I have worked on. All opinions are my own based on 25 years experience working on handguns. This is a very detailed subject, and I'm going to work off a checklist. It's quite involved, and we're going to talk about revolvers first. We'll start out with Smith & Wesson revolvers. J-frame revolvers have a coiled hammer spring and trigger return spring. The trigger return spring is referred to as a rebound slide spring. That's probably the proper terminology, but it's basically a trigger return spring. The average gunsmith, when you're not looking, just cuts your coils and packs your gun full of grease. And he usually cannot wait to get his favorite $2 Chinese stone on your sear. That's what he feels consists of a trigger job, when in fact that's the farthest thing from reality there really is. The K-frame revolvers, or the KL or N-frame revolvers, they use a flat type mainspring. Now, I generally stock anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 springs of all kinds. That's a lot of springs. I might even have more. I mean, I have so many springs, there's no way to keep track of them all. I don't believe in cutting or bending springs. Your life is too important for me to do that. This is a flat mainspring in a Smith & Wesson revolver, and this is what holds the spring in place. It's a strain screw. Now, there's a head on this strain screw that holds the spring. When a gunsmith cannot turn it in deep enough, what he does is, there's only two options for him. Cut the inside of the head of the screw shorter internally on the inside, so he can recess and screw it in deeper, or he can use what they call a reamer and ream out the frame. This is the reamer that they use. I have one here to show you. This is not a good idea. There is a better solution. When you're using, we get a close-up of that reamer. What this reamer does, when the screw is out, you put it in and turn it, and it reams the hole deeper. That's what it's designed to do. I don't use it. What I do, I'm going to show you what the strain screw looks like. This is a factory strain screw. We'll see if we can get a close-up of that. And you can only turn this in so deep because it's got a rather thick head here where it bottoms out. So you can only turn it in so deep. What I use is an Allen type strain screw. Might be a little difficult to see this, but we're going to try. I'm going to put a little light on it and see if you can see The end of the screw has teeth in it, so that when it makes contact with the spring, it can vibrate loose. And on the other end, it's headless, and it's got a place for an Allen wrench. And so that's what I replace the regular strain screws with, because that gives me infinite adjustment. Now I'm going to show you a standard spring that comes from the Smith & Wesson factory. And you can see all this is one flat spring. And the average gunsmith, all he does is either grind this thinner or he bends it right here. He bends it back so it has less tension. And it's going to break on you. As you use it, it's going to break, and it could cost you your life. The Wolf Spring Company has a replacement that I use, and it's called a power rib mainspring. You can see that it's got a rib all the way down the spring. And when I turn it over to show you the other side, there's a hollow section where the screw fits in. As you screw where those teeth are, they make contact in this area. And so they hold this spring very well. And the fact that the screw has no head, I get infinite adjustment. So this is the way to go on a KL&N frame revolver made by Smith & Wesson using a Wolf power rib mainspring. These other gunsmiths don't do that. Major mistake. And then the rebound slide spring, which is also known, I call it a trigger return spring, they just whack off 2, 3, 4 coils. And when you shorten a spring like that, you lose your timing of the spring, and you're in for trouble. Because one of these days, your trigger will not come fully forward, and you won't be able to shoot the gun. You'll be in serious trouble. This is a big mistake. This revolver has been worked on by someone else, and as you can see, as I have the hammer locked in the rear, the single action notch, I just have to push it and it goes forward. So some incompetent gunsmith has already done a job on this. If we're talking about a Colt revolver, this is a Colt revolver, and you can tell because the cylinder latch pulls to the rear. It's totally different. This has just been plated. They did a nice job. This type of gun uses a V-type mainspring, and it works very well, but there are no aftermarket quality V-type mainsprings like this that I'm aware of. So I stay with the factory Colt V-type mainspring. I never grind them thin, and I never bend them. It's critical that they're not to be ground, because if you grind it with a stone, by the naked eye, or with say 220 or 320 grit, you've created big cuts in the spring, and it's gonna break. If you looked at it with a 25 power microscope, you would see major problems. The Colt revolvers are totally different than Smith & Wesson as far as the application of the springs and how they work. The Colt King Cobra, that's a different story. It works totally different. Walter Wolf has managed to cover the entire spectrum of springs for handguns, and he's done quite well. I used to buy springs from his father. That's how far back I've been using his springs, back in the 60s. The The springs used on revolvers should not be cut. When we're talking about revolvers, we can include Ruger. I see it all the time where people cut coils off. When you cut a coil off a spring, regardless of what it is, I'll pull out a coil spring and show you. These are all some of my spring boxes. When you cut a coil or two coils off a finished spring, you can never finish the end of the spring like the factory does. It's never finished as good. You whack a coil off and it sticks up. There's no way it lays flat against the second coil. And you're really looking for trouble. I have so many different springs that I stock, and you can see everything is labeled. I keep everything labeled in boxes. And so regardless, I'm going to go through all the different handguns and talk about different springs so you'll understand exactly